Yes, so today this 3-day virtual conference, and this is a plenary session 2. And I am not taking much time because you know that it is almost 8:20. So I am requesting Professor Nargis Ahmed, who is a professor in Department of Nursing, Alia University, to introduce our today's speaker. So Nargis Madam, over to you.
Thank you, Hassan Bhai. Good evening, everybody present here. On behalf of Bengali Academia for Social Empowerment, it is my proud privilege to introduce and welcome Dr. Rafat Ali, who is Associate Professor at the Department of English, Jadavpur University. He completed his early education in Kalimpong and Sikkim and higher education in Kolkata. He obtained his PhD from Jadavpur University, working on the representation of Islam and the Muslim world in medieval and early modern travel writing. He has since then contributed to this area of study through various publications in the form of articles and book reviews in various peer-reviewed journals and books, as well as conference paper at national and international conference, panel discussion, special lectures, and as resource person at several refresher courses and workshops. Um, he received a research visit grant from Charles Wallace India Trust and was also invited by the St. Philip's Center for Interfaith Relation at UK to deliver a talk on crusade, conversion, and coexistence in medieval travel writing. He has many publications, and currently he is coordinating a project titled Narratives of Faith, Devotional Song and Poetry in the Diverse Tradition of Eastern Region of India. In these 3 days of virtual conference of days on belonging and homelessness, Dr. Rafat Ali will speak on believing and belonging in modern societies, Muslim initiatives and dialogue. Thank you so much, Dr. Rafat Ali, to accepting our request to deliver speech today. So without wasting much time, I'd like to request Dr. Rafat Ali to deliver his speech. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Nargis Ahmed, for that introduction. Um, and I would like to begin with my thanks to the Bengali Academia for Social Empowerment, the Ambedkar Center for Social and Cultural Studies, and Gaur Mahavidyalay and the Department of English, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College, for organizing such a wonderful conference. I will be especially also and special thanks to my colleague Professor Abdul Mateen for considering me to give a plenary lecture and share a dais, even though virtual, with luminaries like Dr. Professor Zoya Hassan and Dr. Professor Prasenjit Biswas, which I'm really grateful to all of you for this opportunity. I understand it's quite late and I'm starting almost 25 minutes behind schedule. And the good news I have to explore to you is that I have around 15 slides, which is quite a longish paper. But I will try and kind of sum up the argument as much as possible, so that I can understand that it can be quite tiring. It's already 8:30, and you've been listening to papers since 5:30 in the evening. So, but like I said, I will try and kind of sum up the argument as much as possible, so that we can come to a round of discussion and question answers if there are any after the speaker. So let me, I have a slightly different format. I will not be speaking, like the other like the other my predecessors, but I have a slightly different format, which is a PowerPoint presentation, which I feel helps me in kind of focusing better. So I'm sharing my slide with you. Right. And I would request the chair to Professor Nargis Ahmed to, I mean, like whenever it's, I mean, I'll try and kind of sum up the argument in the next 45 minutes. But in case I am not able to, please do interrupt and stop me and open the paper for questions. So I hope my slide is visible on the screen.
Yes, visible.
Right. Okay, thank you. Why is this not moving? Okay. Right, so I have titled my paper, Believing and Belonging in Modern Societies, Muslim Initiatives in Dialogue. And the abstracts have been given to you. Nonetheless, I am, just a minute, why is this? Okay, so this is the gist of the argument of my paper today, what I like to call as what, why, and how of the lecture today. So what is my lecture today about? The lecture, to put it in a nutshell, if that helps, would be an attempt at reassessment of words. And I think like you may have already become familiar by now, that I teach in the literature department here, English department. So my concern is primarily with words, so though I will be looking at some of these ideas, and I don't know how much I will be able to engage with political theory, but I do it at the level of words primarily. So the lecture would be an attempt at reassessment of words, rather the ideas behind words like religion and modernity. So these are the two words which I am kind of almost trying to dissect and deconstruct and see what they mean at the level of words, and what are the ideas behind them, and whether they are able to connect with the essence, or rather these are just hollow labels, and these have been misunderstood and bandied around, and much problems have emerged because of that, and how it may be possible to kind of rethink the significance of this word. So I am looking at it at that level. So the lecture would be an attempt at reassessment of words, rather ideas behind words like religion and modernity, as not related in some kind of a zero-sum equation of more modernization means less religion. So that is not the kind, that is the way in which we generally understand. Modernity means a kind of a gradual kind of decline and final abolition of religion. On the contrary, in our own contemporary times, our modern times, what we have witnessed is a phenomenal resurgence of religion, which even seems to be at the service of modernization, ironically. So this is, in this kind of a context, what does it mean to talk about words like religion and modernity? Why am I talking about this? This phenomenon of resurgence of religion need not necessarily be understood as a kind of Game of Thrones. Pardon me if I've got the idea of the famous web series wrong, because I haven't watched it, but from the name I suggest that it's all about power struggle. So when I'm talking about the resurgence of religion, it need not be understood as a kind of a Game of Thrones where one regime replaces another in a perpetual power struggle for domination, but more with an attempt to reconnect with the essence of the words, where religion, like modernity, need not be understood as epochal nouns, but as adjectives and ablatives concerned with liberation and human freedom in the true sense of the term and will to knowledge. So that is how I am trying to look at it as, there is a need. This is, the purpose of the lecture would be more or less this, to give religion and modernity their essence, which may not necessarily be with a perpetual power struggle, but religion getting replaced by a modern world, and the modern world creating a great deal of mess, and then leading to a rise of or resurgence of religion which becomes the kind of the Messiah which will liberate humanity, but religion also becoming the violent kind of source of eternal conflict which will bring hatred. So instead of looking at it that way, I am not looking at it that way. I'm trying to look at religion and modernity in their true sense of the term as what they are supposed to do and how they get disconnected and become labels. And then these labels are what create a lot of problem. So now let me explain the method of the lecture a bit. The lecture will be guided largely by these three questions or initiatives, as I call them here. From the long-standing suspicion of modernity towards religion as the antithesis of the secular, how has there been a shift from an uncritical acceptance of the category of religion to a critical interrogation of religion as a category, especially in dealing with the problems of Muslim minorities in the West, and what is or could be the potentiality of this secularity or post-secularity. And of course, since I'm looking at the concerns of the Muslims from the point of view of minorities in the West to at a more global level, and it may have its kind of you could say bearings in the Indian context as well. So that's one. How has there been a kind of shift from this suspicion of modernity towards religion to a kind of acceptance of religion as in a more critical kind of a way? Secondly, what has been the Christian response to modernity and the shift, particularly in religious movements like liberation theology, or even inside mainstream Western thought like political theology or public theology, the emerging role of the church and not the state as the mediator of religious pluralisms, the ecumenical councils on dialogue. So what has their role been? What you see is, the state is no longer seen as some kind of the guardian of pluralities, but it is given back to the church to mediate. So, and this is a shift that has already been seen. It is something which is a very significant kind of a shift because Western modernity has fought very, very hard, long and enduring struggle. Just a minute, let me just. Sorry, my apologies. So, um, yeah, so what has been the Christian response to modernity and the shift, particularly in liberation theology and public theology, and how, rather than the state, uh, and especially in Western countries where the minorities would be seen only as ethnic groups, and all the problems that are associated with a multicultural society is seen only from that kind of ethnicity and race to a kind of, but religion was something which did not feature. So how that is now gradually being considered significant, and how there is a kind of a need for the church, and how the church actually has been playing a very important role as the facilitator of dialogue between religions. Thirdly, what has been the Muslim participation in this larger project of reassessment of the modern? Because if modernity itself has been going through a kind of critical self-introspection, and if Christianity is also kind of undergoing a major kind of a shift in kind of opening up to the modern force, to modernity, then what has been the Muslim participation in this, particularly the challenges? But this is a very broad canvas which I have drawn, and this lecture will only anticipate like the tip of an iceberg rather than as a pilot study, because I understand that I have drawn an extremely vast canvas here. It's a huge subject which I would like to call, using Hamid Dabashi's book titled Being Muslim in the Modern World, or Islam and Modernity, or Muslims and Modernity. So it's a kind of a larger project in which I have been researching, writing, lecturing for a long time. So it's a kind of a part of that which I am sharing with you in this forum today, where I would like to see dialogue. And dialogue is not just between faith communities, but with modern secularity too, as an important and key player. So when we are talking about dialogue today, I think the most important key, and a very key player in that kind of, in this whole process is modernity itself, because that is the context in which everything is happening. So it's almost, one could say, the uncontested, unquestioned context, which has to, which even when one is, when one talks about secularity or secular, the modern secular world may very well question religion and maybe even abolish it, but secularity itself will not be up for questioning in that sense of the term. So how, what is the kind of shift that is taking place, and in that kind of a shift, how it is a key player in that dialogue. Now, when I'm using the word player, I'm using the word religion as play, rather the divine play, or from the Hindu concept of what is called the Leela, which I find a fascinating thing. So playing is in that sense of the term. Because I was listening to a documentary recently where a documentary on the recent rise of right-wing politics in India, and the ensuing violence, the documentary was titled "In Search of the Soul of India," and the anchor was a person called Atish Tasir, son of the well-known governor of Salman Tasir, if I can't remember the exact name, which province of Pakistan where he was governor, was assassinated in that blasphemy he spoke against blasphemy in Dagestan, and he was assassinated for that. So it's his son, Atish Dasir. He is one anchoring that documentary called In Search of the Soul of India, where Shashi Tharoor makes a very interesting kind of statement, where he says that in India, religion is like, football team, football team hooliganism. So this is how he understands it, like, where no one is actually interested in the game. No one is interested in the play, the divine play or anything like that. These things don't even matter. What they are all interested is is whether their team wins or loses. So, like, so more than the spirit of the game, it's about winning and losing the game and the ensuing violence that accompanies it. Like in India, religion is more like football hooliganism or cricket fanaticism. So this is how he explained it, because I thought it was a very interesting, amusing kind of. So anyway, modernity. Is there a chat? Someone in the chat box written something?
No, Rafat, just neglect it.
Oh, right. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Oh God. Sorry. Yeah. So what I'm saying is talking about the significance and the importance of modern secularity as an important player in dialogue, in the process of dialogue. Modernity, like religion, is sorry. I mean, like that's kind of a wrong statement there. Modernity and religion are both indispensable, and when not genuine, both as contenders for power rather than sources of freedom, can be dangerous and a perennial source of violence, abused by both the ones in privilege as well as the ones who are deprived. This is, in fact, it's always finally all about the us versus them. And I think this brings a question which I, in fact, this evening when Professor Zaya Hassan was talking about majoritarianism and authoritarianism, and I was like, this is something which I thought we could think about as how a kind of the position or the status of deprivation or can actually be a kind of, what you may say, a position from which you can understand oppression better. Had you been yourself in that position of privilege, you become complacent to it, and you do not understand oppression that you yourself may be perpetuating. But when you are the victims, then you can understand it better. But then that should demand a kind of a responsible response, which should not be to enter into that power game, but to see the mistakes that are being made by the oppressor and not to repeat them in our own resistance to that. So that is how we are looking at it. This brings me to the very theme of this conference, which is the question of belonging and not belonging, the homelessness, the marginalization, and alienation, which here I am trying to understand from the case and status of Muslim minorityness in the modern world. Okay. So, when I'm talking about this, I need to begin with some theoretical and practical clarifications regarding what I mean by status of Muslim minorityness in the modern world. Now, If you look at the ideal, if you look at the Muslim world and the ideal of it, as if you look at the Muslim Ummah as a kind of an ideal of Islamic society as envisioned in the Quran. Okay. It says, thus have we, this is from quoting from the second chapter of the Quran, which is, thus have we made of you an ummah justly balanced, that ye may be witnesses over the nations, and the messengers, and the messenger a witness over yourself. I mean, an ummah which is justly balanced, and I mean, it's a kind of a community which has gradually been educated and becomes a kind of a witness. Or if you look at the 96th chapter, which actually, according to the chronology, is the first in the Revelation, first verse to be revealed. Read in the name of the Sustainer who has created man out of the germ cell. Read, for the Sustainer is the most bountiful one, who has taught man the use of the pen, taught man what he knew not. So, if this is the kind of an ideal in a society which is based on reading, knowing, knowledge, interpretation, and then the kind of society which is supposed to be based on that kind of knowledge, a knowledgeable society. From that, if you look at the present state of malaise of the Muslim world, then the question arises as to what went wrong. And sometimes the question can be even as wrong as this. This is the famous kind of the cover of the Atlantic with that essay by Bernard Lewis, who was, for those who may not know Bernard Lewis was, I mean, like at one point of time, US foreign doctrine was the Lewis doctrine. So he was asked, so all matters relating to the Middle East and all that, Bernard Lewis was supposed to be. So this is a man of that, I mean, like stature, writing a very important essay at that time called The Roots of Muslim Rage. And the cover itself was so misleading as to why are the Muslims so angry? Why are they kind of raging? And what is it that makes them some kind of malcontents of society? The answer, I think, to begin with, I will start with a very interesting quote by the poet Munir Niazi, which actually, I think the essence of it will be better in Urdu, but I will just read it out in the translation in English, which is, what account of my deeds to anyone could I give? All the questions were wrong, what answers could I give? Now this is the epigraph, this line by Munir Niazi is the epigraph in the concluding chapter of the book which I am showing you on the left-hand side of the slide by Sahab Ahmad, called What is Islam? And it has a very important, very interesting title called The Importance of Being Islamic. And I feel that it's a kind of a very direct answer to a statement once made by the well-known novelist Salman Rushdie, that I am a Muslim, but I am not Islamic. So this was almost a kind of, let's say, like, how can you be Muslim without being Islamic? So what does it mean to be Islamic, and what is it? So he is writing, like, what is Islam and the importance of being Islamic. So in the concluding chapter of titled The Importance of Being Islamic of his book, What is Islam? Sahab Ahmad summarizes poetically the spirit of his profound work with these memorable lines from the poet Munir Niazi, which I have just read out to you. In Urdu, it says something like this: अपनी आमाल के हिसाब किसी को मैं क्या देता, सारे सवाल गलत थे, जवाब किसी को मैं क्या देता. So you see, I mean, like if you're not asking, I mean, like if your question is something like this, like why are the Muslims angry? How can you answer? I mean, like, or right after the 9/11, when there were journalists out on the street asking, I mean, why do you think this happened? Which side are you on? Do you think this is like these are very? I mean, like, these are not the right questions to ask. So I mean, like, how will you explain your kind of say something like being and belonging to that kind of society when you are kind of framed in that kind of questions. The book itself, which was published in 2016, posthumously after the author's early and tragic demise in the same year, in 2015, is an attempt to put forward a conceptualization of Islam as theoretical object and analytical category that maps meaningfully onto Islam as a human and historical phenomenon, and was provoked by the sense that the existing conceptualizations of Islam, whether as religion, as culture, as civilization, as discursive tradition, as core beliefs, as whatever Muslims say it is, a law-centered phenomenon, as so plural and various as to be Islams and not Islam, etc., have in various ways failed to convey the fullness of the reality of what it is that has actually been and is going on in the historical society of Muslims living as Muslims. So this is, I mean, it is not a kind of a monolithic category into which, say, a Huntingtonian kind of a division can work as to, okay, I mean, like the forces of Islam against the forces of modernity. It doesn't work like that. I mean, both are extremely kind of diverse phenomenon, and one has to understand in their full kind of historicalness. So from this from this kind of book itself, I have picked a few kind of questions while being troubled like Munir Niazi about their validity. In the wake of the news of continuous violence almost promising to annihilate all traces of civilization by extremist interpreters of Islam, the question that is raised is, why can't Muslims separate religion from politics? In fact, this is the way Karen Armstrong begins one of lectures on the crisis of, it's an old lecture on the crisis of the ISIS or the ISIL. Before explaining how religion as a category in the Western sense, with the latent legacy of Protestant Christianity, needs to be problematized in its application to Islam. The other question, of course, not clear like Armstrong's, but one which can have the same emphatic tone, would be, why can't Muslims separate religion from culture? As I feel particularly potent in Western societies, with a growing number of migrant Muslim communities. In these societies during the last 2 decades, a shift has occurred in the way Muslims have been viewed by the state, if you may call it that, from being judged as an ethnic minority or a collection of minorities to a distinct religious group, so much so as to have become a problem and a threat. So the threat comes more because of their religiousness rather than their religion, rather than ethnicity is something that you can deal with, but religion is something that becomes a dangerous force. If you take the case of Britain specifically, and I'm quoting from Geoffrey Nash's writing Muslim Identity, published London Continuum, when he says, if you take the case of Britain specifically, Geoffrey Nash, in writing the Muslim Identity, says that the public awareness of Muslim presence coincided with the agitation against Salman Rushdie's novel, The Satanic Verses, in 1988, which it has been argued was framed by an Islamist agenda of international proportions. Sorry, which was fanned by an international Islamist agenda of international proportions. As a result, and this is a kind of term that he uses from German, which is called a Kulturkampf, meaning a cultural struggle against Islam, has been invoked with the aim of refuting and nullifying the perceived Islamic threat to Western values, in the process reasserting these values as universals constitutive of the entire program of modernity. Nash's concept of the Kulturkampf takes its cue from Bismarck's policies directed in the name of secularism against the influence of the Catholic Church in Germany in the 1870s. The motive undoubtedly was political then as well as now, and complicit in the process is a host of writers and artists, and interestingly, Muslims who are distinguished as being of Muslim heritage but not Islamic. But unlike the 19th century Roman Catholic Church, Islam for the West, within the clash of civilizations thesis, if we kind of use that language over there, has been an amorphous enemy, which since the 18th century has entered into 2 centuries of retreat and can only coexist along with the West as, like Ali Allawi puts it in his book, The Crisis of Islamic Civilization, as a relic of the past, surviving only as a private faith or as a loose set of morals and ethical principles, where mosque-going like church-going would have to succumb to the laws of social and economic cultural progress. So, I mean, if this is the way it has been seen, I mean, this is what religion has, that exactly is. So when you are talking about this kind of almost a kind of conflict between Islam and the West and all, it is not so simple, because one has to understand, like, what you mean by Islam is something so diverse. It's not a monolith. There is, I think that the concept of the Tawheed is very important. But the Tawheed is explained by a vast diversity of historical phenomena. And this is something which is difficult for Western theorists to kind of engage with, willingly or unwillingly. Which brings me at this point to understand, if we have understood Islam in that kind of a diversity, the same thing needs to be done to modernity as well. Modernity is, at this point, we need to understand modernity's own long and enduring struggle with the church and the zero-sum equation of modernization and religion, as to why, like, how this kind of modernization, what you may call rationality, modernity, and secularization has been used in the same kind of a plane. Let me kind of very quickly read. I think what I want to say here is, at least in when one talks about the structure of modern societies, be it in sociology or philosophy or political thought, at the heart of it is religion. And I mean, in fact, with respect to sociology, it can be said that modern sociology emerged precisely through an attempt to make sense of how social order was forged. This is from Eduardo Mendieta, Rationality, Modernity, and Secularization. Mendieta has been a kind of a close, has been working a lot on the German writings of the German philosopher Jürgen Habermas, particularly in his theories of the post-metaphysical and post-secular societies. So from there, I am kind of using a couple of things there. He says that with respect to sociology, it can be said that modern sociology emerged precisely through an attempt to make sense of how social order was forged from a religiously sanctioned social and political matrix, and how, in turn, religion itself had been sublimated and transcended through the development of profane structures of subjective, interpersonal, and worldly interaction. At the heart of sociology is the notion that modern social order emerged through the dual process of privatization of religion and the disenchantment of the world that had been rendered profane and thus knowable and manipulable by human intention. So this is the kind of dual kind of what you may call the double edge of modernity. On one hand, it talks about modernity is possible because of this privatization of religion. By privatization of religion, I mean not something like someone like or some corporate house takes over religion, but by privatization of religion, I mean how religion is kind of relegated to the domestic. You know, it is only a story which it cannot have any kind of an important place in the public sphere. So it can be only that. So it is a kind of it is someone's private matter, and it is not like when it comes to matters of the public sphere, there has to be a kind of a secular kind of an authority. Now that also itself is a kind of a paradox, because I mean that secularization, that secular authority somehow, though it rationalizes, you may say, all religious institution, but one wonders that if that really happens, and what may really happen is not the rationalization of religion, but simply power changing hands, and it may be in the hands of what you may call a clerical authority, and now it is in the hands of a lay authority. But what is unquestioned remains power, and that is something which is never up for discussion. And on the other hand, both modernity and religion, their concern will, in actuality, be not with power, but with liberation. So this is how we are trying to look at things. So secularization understood in, I mean, there is a kind of, this kind of emphasis on secularization has to be understood in three ways, which in general in relation to modernity. Number one, the separation of the church and the state that took place in Europe and the Americas between the 16th and 17th century. This separation becomes a theoretical model that normatively defines the very process of secularization and the ideological formation that derides those societies that have not undergone this social process. So in a way, I mean, it may be a good idea to secularize religious authority. Should I, sorry, I mean, I cannot see if there is any kind of a question. I can take it at the end of the paper. So just a minute, I think I'll just kind of just check it. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I thought there was someone asking a question, or the chair was trying to say something. So because when the slide is on, I cannot see the chat box. So this one, the separation of church and state, the separation of church and state in its own time is a good idea, because I mean, given the kind of misuse of, you could say, religion, it may be imperative to rationalize and secularize that authority. You cannot have a kind of an authority which is unquestionable. Authority should always be in the kind of a critical scanner time and again. And if it is not up to being authority, then it should be changed. So if that is the way, that is the spirit in which it takes place, then that separation becomes a theoretical model, the norm that defines a very process of secularization. That everywhere there has to be a separation of church and state, and which may, especially when you look at the case of Islam, it may not be right, because in Islam, the very validity of the state comes from the church. In fact, there is no church and state in Islam. It's like, it's fused into one. So the central tenets of Western sociological theory sees the necessary link between the rationalization of the social order to its secularization in such a way that society only merits being called modern if its social structure has been secularized. So modernity, understood as a condition, is this telos of secularization, which takes away the essence of it. I mean, everything has to be secularized. Yes, I mean, like, it has to be secularized, but the question that remains is, will secularity itself go under the critical scanner of secularization? That is something which may be up for discussion. So modernity as a secularization, rationalization of sacrosanct, unquestioned authority, modernity as a secularization, rationalization of religious institutions, and modernity as a secularization of the normative model of rationalization, modernization, secularization, are these all the same? Maybe not. I mean, it may, especially when you look at it in the... So what if it is not that? I mean, like, you know, if the if secularity or secularism, let us not use the word secularism even. I mean, like, if secularity itself is becoming a norm, then it is undoing the very philosophy of what on which it has kind of built its modernization. So that's the reason why I said, like, it becomes a double-edged kind of a thing where you have to break authority, but then you cannot live without authority. So rethinking the traditional tethering of rationalization to modernization and secularization, this has been a kind of a new direction in the understanding of modernity, and not just the church or religion, but the unquestioned power of secularity itself, particularly the secularization of state power. This is something that is gradually kind of being discussed and understood in what is called the post-secular society. Um, so there are, like, philosophers you may have read, like Jürgen Habermas or Roy Olivier and others. Like, they are talking about. Let me, in fact, give you this quotation as early as 1965. Just a minute. So this is in 1965. Harvey Cox made a distinction between secularization and what may be termed as fundamentalist secularism. This is a distortion of the freedom which Western modernity had struggled hard to achieve. So it is this narrow interpretation, says Olivier Roy. I think I am kind of really past 9 now. That Olivier Roy says needs to be abandoned in order to broaden the scope of secularization and acknowledge the articulation of religious identity within the public space. And this is a direction which has already been taking place in Western thought. In this regard, one may mention specifically theologian Harvey Cox and the myth of the secular, where Harvey Cox said that there is a kind of a myth of the secular which needs to be busted, which is the rise of education, literacy, reason, science, and technology. This was the promise of the modern world, that the rise of education, literacy, reason, science, and technology would gradually see the decline of religion in the 20th century, not have the power to shape cultures, and would have no place in the public sphere. One. Secondly, the modern age would set right to all our problems, disease, suffering, inequalities. And thirdly, the gradual change in the nature of religiousness. And there would be a shift away from, this is, like what has been happening now. So what Harvey Cox is saying is that this myth has been busted. And at least in the last 5 decades, the religion has not disappeared, but rather almost come back with a vengeance. And what we see in the phenomena today is a kind of a resurgence of religion. In the last 5 decades, what we have seen is this uncanny resilience of religion to research, particularly in movements like the Pentecostal movements, liberation theology. Liberation theology, many of you may be familiar, developed in Latin America. Gustavo Gutierrez, who in fact wrote that book, Liberation, the Theology of the Oppressed. Religion was no more the prerogative of the privileged, but the essence of religion is always from the perspective of the underprivileged. If you look at all religious histories, be it Jesus, be it Prophet Muhammad, it's always, it's always the kind of the voice of the subaltern in the face of oppression. So in this kind, and then you look at the direction of Western thought itself in political theology, or even mainstream theology, it's opening up its branches in disciplines like public theology, which takes into consideration, like, the religion cannot be the prerogative of people working inside cloisters thinking about God, but what are the social implications of equity, justice, and political participation and all that, and what are its direct relation with religion, a theology, with the understanding of God, because the understanding of God is actually related with this directly. And along with this, also equally disturbing, not equally disturbing is the right word. Along with this, the disturbing phenomena, excuse me, is the violent side of this resurgence. For if people can die for faith, people can even kill for faith. So, see, this is what modernity has seen. Anyway, it has not been able to get rid of problems and suffering and diseases even. Now we who have lived through a pandemic, we have seen that of all the kind of development in medical science and all that, it's just a kind of a common flu which takes millions of lives. So that is what it has come to. So all the kind of promises were vain promises, it seems, almost, and then there has been a kind of almost a resurgence of religion. And then also what Harvey Cox is saying is that there has been a gradual change in the nature of religiousness itself, which is shifting away from hierarchy and dogma, not relying on what you may call authority in the sense of a priest class or anything like that, but a directness of experience, what is called in theological language as the experiential turn, where in order to understand religion, one needs to kind of have a direct experience of it rather than any kind of mediation in between, like the church or anything like that. So interfaith dialogue also has been taking shape, significant kind of steps in this, and it's shifting where the church is taking significant steps as mediator between faith communities. This is what I told you in the beginning of the lecture. And especially if you look at, say, for instance, the British scenario, there is actually now a Faith Communities Unit, FCU, in the Home Office of the British government. And the mediator of religious pluralism, or what earlier was only seen as ethnic diversity, is actually, there is a church which actually mediates, and the church is already undergoing a great deal of all its old ancient missionary kind of approach to a kind of opening up to the wisdom and the knowledge and the essence of all religion, so that all religions can come together as one and sort the problems of humanity in a general kind of a way, in their own diverse ways, but still in a unified kind of a way. Maybe not a uniform kind of way, but in a unified kind of a way. So you have the Nostra Aetate, the declaration of the relation of the Church with non-Christian religions of the Second Vatican Council, passed in 1965 by Pope Paul VI. And then now Coming to the last section of my paper, I hope yes, I think I said that I'm 45 minutes, I'll try to wind up. So it was in this context of modernity, and just a minute, I need to wind up. It was in this context of modernity, colonial modernity and imperialism, that Islam enters into a new encounter with an already shifting Christianity. So when we talk about Muslim participation in this kind of already shifting direction in mainstream Western thought, which is already reassessing modernity, which is already reassessing secularism itself, how secular is, and all that. And when church is opening up to the otherness of religions, what has been the Muslim role in that? Now, the problem with Muslim participation in this is that Islam, in most Islamic Muslim countries, modernity arrived in the form of colonial modernity and imperialism. And it is with this that Islam enters into a new encounter with an already shifting kind. So that kind of need to talk to each other, to understand what is going on inside the Enlightenment tradition, what is going on inside theology. This is something which takes time, and it needs people to come to a common kind of a platform and talk about each other openly. Even if it means hostile talking, let's do it, but you need to talk genuinely. There is no point in kind of hiding your problems, being apologetic to one another, paying lip service that, oh, all religions talk about good things. And then finally you go back home and then tell your children, okay, be careful, he's a Hindu, don't go to his house. Be careful, he's a Muslim, don't go to his house. He's a Christian. That will remain forever. I mean, like, this is an insincere kind of, you are not engaged. So in order to engage in dialogue, like, one has to come to the table with an open mind, an honest mind, and not cover up your faults. What you have done to each other, you tell that and you apologize for that. That kind of a thing. But then the problem inside the Muslim world, inside the Islamic traditions, there are several. Two important ones which I have highlighted there are the concept of tajdeed and ijtihad. Tajdeed, you may all know, may be renewal, and ijtihad, meaning independent reasoning. Now, so inside Islam, there is already, the Islamic tradition, there is already a mechanism of adjusting to your times, your context. You have the whole notion of the jurists, the fiqh, and all that, and the renewal that has to take place, the tajdeed. But then at the same time, there is also a kind of a great deal of suspicion towards innovation or bid'ah. So how do you kind of, this becomes a kind of a big blockage. And the ijtihad is something which many may know. There have been great jurists in the past who have almost closed the doors of independent reasoning forever now. So how do you deal with these kind of issues? Abdurrahman Doi wrote a very interesting article called An Islamic Agenda for Non-Muslim Minorities, Duties and Responsibilities of Minorities in Non-Muslim States, a point of view, in 1987, where he says Muslims are not aware of how to deal with dialogue because there is nothing in the classical sources about it. In the classical sources, most of the classical sources were written at a point of time when Islam was not much in contact with other faiths, or even if it was in a position of superiority to them. So in this kind of a state of minorityness, to talk about it becomes a kind of an entirely new and novel experience for Muslims, and they do not know how to deal with it. Whether you open up to new ideas or whether you kind of try and kind of preserve and purify your ideas. So both become a great hindrance to dialogue, which is not able to cope with what is happening in the Western tradition or inside Christianity, or maybe even in other faiths. There is no unified body to mediate the world, like the World Council of Churches. Christianity, for instance, even though they may have differences in the Roman Catholic Church or the evangelical churches, but there is some kind of, a unified body which is gradually emerging to talk about it. And the state is taking a backseat gradually, and the church is playing a leading role. But then it's not unified in the Muslim world. I mean, especially, like with the demise of the Khilafat, for instance, after World War One, there is nothing which unites all the diversity of Muslim, you could say, historical realities together into one body. And then there is, and to make matters worse, there are these kind of political powers vying for power, and then there are blocks of power which are there, and then there are this kind of factionalism, internal factionalism. So there is, like, how will you come to dialogue with this kind of in this kind of a state? And then there are matters which make it even more worse, like dawah, a hijrah, a jihad, and, or even something like the division of the world into Darul Islam and Darul Harb. For a long time, the Western world was Darul Harb, the land of war. And the relation of Muslims to non-Muslims would be guided by factors like it is your duty of any good Muslim to actually teach Islam to the other person. So there was a kind of the other non-Muslim that you meet is a potential convert. That becomes a big kind of an obstacle and becomes a big hindrance because you are not able to accept the otherness. Dawah is also to a great extent related with hijrah. Now, hijrah, why? Because you move from a place of persecution to a place of prosperity. And jihad, you wage war against the infidel. But then, interestingly, in recent last few decades, the Muslim world has seen another interesting phenomenon, where this time it is not the infidel who is persecuting the Muslim, but it is the Muslim persecuting the Muslim. And though there are, of course, exceptions like the Rohingya and all that, but there is, it's largely the Muslims, be it in Syria or be it in most of the countries, you will see in the Middle East, it's like Muslims being persecuted by Muslims because of factional strife, and then Muslims finding asylum and security in the land of the infidel, that is the West. So how do you deal with that? And this is something which this is something which becomes a kind of a great problem. In fact, I wanted to talk more about one particular proponent of dialogue, Ismail Raji al-Faruqi, who says that the minorityness actually becomes the responsibility of migrant Muslims in minority, is what is going to lead the Muslim world today. Because from that minorityness will you be able to connect with the essence of Islam. Because when you were in the position of power, you became oppressors. And there has to be a kind of, it's like it's mentioned in the Quran that, when the divine awards, like there is time and again you may have, for those who have read the Quran, like there is the example of the Bani Israel to the new emerging Muslim community in Medina. Like you see that God has favored a community, but if God wants, he can punish that community. So that does not mean that God is partial, but when there is privilege given to you, you have to use the privilege responsibly. And when you are in a place of deprivation, that does not mean that you will want that privilege, but you will be able to understand the nature of oppression better. And then from that position, you will be able to give direction to your resistance in a more morally guided way. So that becomes, if it's a division of the world into Darul Harb and Darul Islam, today scholars in the West add to the earlier division of House of Islam and House of War a new category pertaining to the situation of Muslim minorities in the West and other parts of the world, known as the House of Witness and House of Invitation, what is called the Darul Shahada or the Darul Dawah, where Muslim Rais-a-Datra for living in the pluralist society is not only to propagate the faith and see every non-Muslim as a budding convert, but to more deeply understand the Quranic message in, and this is quoting from the third chapter, let there arise out of you a band of people inviting to all that is good, enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong. So this is a very broad statement. It does not ask people, like, it's not that football team, like, where you will increase your numbers and your team members. It's not the question of increasing your team members, but it is like, playing the game, the lila, in a true spirit of the game, where you have to invite people to what is good and what is prevent them from what is wrong. In this, I will end with the last quotation from Professor Ataullah Siddiqui, who passed away last year. A very pioneering figure in interfaith dialogue and Christian-Muslim relations, who's won 2 books I am just showing you here. If you want, for those who may be interested, may read up more on this: Christian-Muslim dialogue in the 20th century, and the writings of Ismail Razi al-Faruqi, Islam and Other Faiths. I'm just going to make the statement and wind up the paper. Ataullah Siddiqui, in an honest and courageous way, that defines religion, that defines intellectual integrity, posits the Islamic concept of da'i, the one who is inviting others to faith. The ones who invite to the faith are sharing the obligation, at least in the Western context, with Christians. Now, I think this is a very kind of a major step. Therefore, the witnesses unto mankind, which we saw in Surah Al-Baqarah in the beginning, the witnesses unto mankind become co-witnesses. This is, I think, remarkable. It is not you who are the witnesses. Anyone who is in the path of God, you are all together in inviting those who are not. And that does not mean that whether you are a Christian, that doesn't mean that you have to be a Muslim. You have to understand the word Muslim or a Christian in a broad sense of the term. So the understanding of religion through shared responsibilities respects and appreciates the legacy of the freedom of the individual and conscience gained by post-Enlightenment Europe after a long and bitter struggle. It may even share a similar goal with John Rawls's notion of overlapping consensus within the liberal discourse of Western societies by identifying common goals of social and moral welfare without compromising the centrality of Tawheed. In that, it may negotiate with the liberal doctrines by seeking a truly secular society that acknowledges plurality not according to a dominant hegemonic term, but in the true spirit of otherness. The willingness to work with each other in the achievement of higher objectives while recognizing the differences and uniquenesses of all faiths and systems with full knowledge and acceptance that the differences will remain may be a challenge, but possible without hostility. That is all. Thank you very much for your time and patience for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Rafat Ali, for this very thoughtful deliberation. I think we would be needing more time to grapple with the full connotations and implications of your talk. However, let me very quickly summarize two or three points from what I gathered from your lecture. First, in your talk you have tried to understand the resurgence of religion. Okay.
True.
Yeah. So, and you have tried to analyze and understand how to cope with that and how to go forward with that. So first, and in doing that, you have talked about how modernity and all its ideology of secularization, rationalization has led to its own problems. It has not only led to our disenchantment with the world, but also it has led to the control of the very nature itself, because we are right now facing with the grim prospect of an Anthropocene, where our mother planet is in danger. So Yeah, so the modernity and its receipts, yeah, that is there, and then this resurgence of religion, okay, and so to deal with that, to how to take the positives out of religion, out of faith, you have uh, uh, talked about two responses to that: the Christian response or the church's response, and you have tried to see how the Muslims can respond to this situation. So you have talked about the church and its role of interfaith dialogue. We can refer to Pope Francis and his efforts, in interfaith dialogue, and talking about the Muslim response to it. In this scenario of the importance of asserting the importance of the religion or the faith in this world now. So you have critically engaged with the current situation in the Muslim, quote unquote, Muslim world. You have talked about the problems like if we approach with in our mind with concepts like dawa, and where we think of any non-Muslim as a potential convert. So that can lead to a difficulty. Rather than going with that notion, if we can think in a different way, like you have talked about to conceptualize the social field as a kind of lila, where we engage with others, we play the football without thinking of winning the game, maybe rather playing it for the pleasure of playing. Okay, so that might create a condition or a kind of ecosystem where we can live together. So that is the important question that is facing us today, and here maybe the Muslims can contribute here. You have also referred to political theology, liberation theology, how theology can work for the oppressed, and you have also referred to Jesus and Prophet Muhammad, and how they conceptualized a kind of social justice from the rubrics of faith. So that can also work today. So these are the takeaways from your lecture, and now I open it to the audience, and I request them to put their questions. Either they can directly put the question to our speaker, or they can write it in the chat box. So
Yeah, thank you, Murshid. You've kind of more or less summarized it quite well. Yeah, okay. So I can understand that you've been listening very attentively. Thank you very much for that.
yeah, thank you.
That's very important itself.
We have one question already. It's from Akilima Hassan, and
Rafat,
Yeah, Shamim.
yeah, may I ask you one question,
Yes,
please?
please.
okay,
Yes.
so we
So
we
this
will
is my
take Hassan's
question
questions
related
later.
to, yeah, this is my question related to like the way you started your lecture, arguing that how church is now opening up itself to the world outside and engaging in an interfaith dialogue, and this is really very, this is something that appeared to me like striking precisely because like if church for the time being trying to secularize itself and engaging with other world, we also have a memory of church having at least a very ugly history, if not
Exactly.
bloodiest of it all, precisely because
True.
church started otherizing Muslim world from 8th, 9th century itself, and hot side talks side of course in Orientalism talks about all this, and from 10th century of course we would have crusades. So church actually participated in that otherization, and the person who is held to be the greatest reformer from the Christian, from the Christian world, of course, is Martin Luther. So Martin Luther in his 95 thesis of course talked about all these reformation, secularization and all that, but also Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther of course was one who very mercilessly attacked the Jews. And one critic, for instance, argues that without Martin Luther, there would not have been any Hitler. So church, of course, has this bloody history behind it. And now church is opening up. The question that I would like ask, or rather want to know, the thing that I would want to know is like, why do you think, or rather, where this spirit of secularization is coming from? Like, where can we locate this spirit of secularization, interfaith dialogue, church accepting, acknowledging, embracing the other within itself? Is it by is it Bible, or do you think this is a pressure from, let's say, 18th century discourse of modernity, secularization, and of course, in general, the discourse of enlightenment, where actually this spirit of secularization comes from?
Yeah. Thanks, Shamim. That was a very, I mean, like you've observed very correctly in saying, and I also find this remarkable. I mean, like the one who has been the culprit for so long. I mean, like the whole crusades were fought on that, and I mean, they've given the church and its history, its reputation, and then to build so much of trust in it once again, to make it the mediator of dialogue, and state taking a backseat, okay, and to bring in. I think this requires, I mean, like, this is something which is remarkable in Western thought. I mean, like, which has, and if you read, for instance, I mean, like, you should read Habermas, particularly the post-secular society and all that, and you will see the direction in which it is already going, and what you talked about, your question. I mean, so that in itself is remarkable, and then of course, church with its history of mission. I mean, like in that move, the shift from mission to dialogue itself, because even when you talk about the colonial modernity, the church is always a kind of an ally in that. So having kind of despite given that kind of history, and still, I mean, what we can say is like it's remarkable. I mean, if West is able to do that, and then I mean, one should understand that, like, the spirit of modernity remains. Yeah. Now, is this happening because of, there are various reasons why the shift is taking place. One, of course, I think was there in your question itself, and that is the answer to some extent, I feel, which is, I mean, particularly after World War II, the rise in migrants in Western societies, okay, particularly in Britain, if you see, I mean, like Asian migration there, and then finally the kind of because when Asians would come, they would not just come with to merge over there, but they would come with their, like, their cultural baggage along with them. So how do you cope with that? And at some point of time, it also becomes a kind of a need to adjust to that. And then, like I said, the shift took place from looking at it as an ethnic problem. And then if you read, like, Shamim, I know you, because you're a student of literature, I know. If you read the novels of people like Hanif Qureshi, for instance, yeah. If you read the novels of people like Salman Rushdie, for instance, Monica Ali and others, you will see that it's a different world. But when you are moving, like, that is, like, it's still seen as an ethnic problem. But then that kind of movement away from, like, all Asians, I mean, all Muslims as just Asians will not work. Like, you have to engage with the fact of religion, because religion has that potential of liberating. So you have to deal with it. So this is something which is the reason why the church, there are violent moments, catastrophic moments like the 9/11 or the 7/7 and all that, which shocks. Like, people, your neighbor who was playing cricket with you in your backyard tomorrow has strapped bombs all over his body and blown himself off in a public place. How did that happen? I mean, where did so these are events, things which has made. These are things which has also made the church reconsider, the state reconsider, and I mean, in a sense, I would say that deep inside the germinal seeds of it is already there in modernity. No matter how much it takes a wrong direction, but modernity, one cannot lose maybe faith in that kind of its inherent intrinsic reality. So that's how I would like to look at it here.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have two questions in the chat box. One is from Aklima Hassan, and she writes, communal politics is the reason why Muslims today wear faith on their sleeve. Your thoughts on this? So after you take this question, I can go to Sima's question. Yeah.
Communal politics is the reason why Muslims today wear. Yeah, that is also the reason. I mean, I think a part of this was dealt by Professor Zoya Hassan in her lecture, and there is. I mean, on one hand, I think I would answer this question this way: that, like, on one hand, if there is deprivation in that state of minorityness, leave aside the Gulf countries and all that, but where Muslims are a minority, and even in countries like India and all that, and then when you see the potential of religion not to liberate you, to understand the face of oppression better, but like this is, I think Tim Winters puts it very well. Tim Winters says that if you look at it as a kind of a conflict between MacDonald and MacJihad, okay. So you want to kind of you want to share in that pie. It's a corrupt order, and you want to be a part of that because you feel that you have been deprived. Deprivation should not, and that is something which I think where if this is the kind of mentality which remains, if you are not able to use deprivation responsibly, then there are bound to be leaders who will capitalize on that, and that has been the case. Always has been the case. So resistance is not just to the forces, the right wingism in. Just a minute, my battery is really running low. I'll just quickly attach the thing. Yeah, sorry about that. Battery was running low. So, yeah, I mean, like the resistance is not only to right-wing politics, but in the kind of people like whom Professor Hassan mentioned in her lecture this evening. You need to be wary of those as
well. Okay, one more question, and this is from Seema Ahmed. She asks that she refers to Bengal and how here people like Ram Mohan and Girish Ghosh and others, they initiated a kind of interfaith dialogue. I mean, Girish Ghosh translated Quran in Bangla, so a kind of interfaith dialogue. And she says that tradition has ended, and she wants to know why that tradition has not been revived in India so far. Sorry, in Bengal so far. So your take on that?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's. I think, like I would say, I mean, I think to a great extent, why? Well, first of all, the question remains how much people know about those traditions in the first place, and how much those traditions have been, like, especially if you were to go to the people who are in the front line of dealing with the Muslims, the imams, or leaders, local religious leaders, and how much are they, first of all, familiar with these traditions. I think educating them on that, knowing about them, discussing them, I think that has been something where Muslims have maybe they have lost out on that. One reason could be that I cannot say that with certainty as to. I mean, it's a very. I mean, it's a question to ponder upon. But that is one of the reasons which I feel as a spontaneous kind of view. The other, of course, is um, um, I mean the rising. I mean, another one I would definitely draw your attention towards would be a kind of, if radicalization is the right word to use, the kind of, from the state of deprivation, the response is, like I say, if your minorityness and your deprivation doesn't lead you to respond in the right way, then it also may lead to radicalism and the growing, kind of say waves of radicalism that all over the Muslim world, young men, young people, that also could be the reason why you are not drawn towards those traditions. So a proper kind of what you may call in Urdu zikr, right? You have to charcha, you say, you do more and more charcha about that. That's one. And the other is to, of course, guide your responses in the right way. Your responses from a position of deprivation in the right way, so that you do not simply seek benefits in that sense of the term, but try and understand the true essence of deprivation and liberation. I think that would be one way I'd look at it.
Yeah, in Bengal also, we also had poets like Nazrul Islam,
Yes.
Yeah, who through his poetic practices, practice this kind of living together. Okay.
I can give you the example of like what something Professor Adawullah Siddiqui had once said in a lecture on training of imams, where he had said that especially, like, say, if you have the ulama or the leaders, because they have a very important role to play, because in the absence of a kind of a leadership body like the Khilafat or anything like that, is the ulama which somehow takes that position. So there is a great deal of responsibility on their shoulders as well. And then when you look at the quality of, because the academic, I mean, how much academics will be able to take that role is a big kind of, that's another debate which we do not want to go into right now. But as of now, we see that has been somehow, that is a mantle taken by the ulama. Okay. Now, when the ulama deals with this, one problem with the ulama is that they are not well versed with the local traditions. The traditions that they are well versed is always with the Arabs and the Turks and that. So when you want to talk about, say, when you are passing a jurist or a mufti in India, for instance, how much of Gandhi will he have read? How much of Gita will he have read? How much of Tagore will he have read? How much of all these poets will he have read to actually engage with the psychology and the mindset of the people here, and that's it's a big gap over there. So that also has to be considered. Yeah.
Yeah. There is a question from Mary Bhagwar, and she has written it. It's very long, but I am just trying to summarize what she wants to ask. Her question is that since religion talks about giving, injunctions to giving, okay, donating and giving and helping others, so she fears that whether secularization of the society and the world will lead to a decrease in charitable giving. So she wants to know your thought on that. Whether secularization of society will lead to decrease in charitable giving.
Definitely. In fact, you should read Harvey Cox. Harvey Cox, if you read The Myth of the Secular or the Secular City and all that, you will see that the religion, ironically, which was supposed to be abolished by the modern secular state, actually, when it makes its resurgence, either as a liberating force, either as a kind of a force of terror, and it also makes its resurgence, and I think we can relate with that in our country very well. It also actually serves the interests of the of capital. So, so religion can actually be used for the service of modernization. Religion can be used can be used to justify modernization. So what is happening is it's the essence of religion. Like I mentioned Jesus over there, or Prophet Muhammad, and all the prophets. When you look at that, you will see that one characteristic feature of religion is always fellow feeling. All religion teaches compassion, and in that kind of way, charity is a concept. In fact, I can go on for another 1 hour on this concept of charity. Charity is such a beautiful concept which actually explains why there is inequality in the world. Like, it is inequality human constructed, or is it a part of the natural created order of things? Why are people, why some are more strong, some are less strong, some are more poor, some are more wealthy, some are intelligent, some are this. So you understand this as a kind of there's a very interesting Moroccan philosopher called Abdurrahman Taha, who says that the question of charity actually answers this, where everything is held, be it wealth or strength or health or even a good disposition or anything, is in trusteeship. You do not own it. And if you have it, then it is imperative that you give a part of it to those who don't. And that is how equilibrium in society will be, because this is not inequality, but this is diversity. So you have to, for those who have, cannot sit on it, they have to give to those who don't. And when you do this, there is a kind of an equilibrium, and this is something which I think ideas of like secular, and I think what she is asking is, I mean, like, when you have this kind of a capitalist, consumerist society, which depends on, like, who, I mean, like, whoever is the survival of the fittest kind of a thing. Like, it actually leaves no room for the underprivileged or the deprived and all that. So, not with a sense of, like, pitying, but it's a kind of a duty. Like, it's a part of structure of diversity. So those who have should give to those who don't. And that is how you should maintain the equilibrium. In fact, not only of those who have to those who don't, but you have to maintain, like you mentioned, ecology in your own responses. Like, we cannot use up our resources. Like, it's not for us to finish it off. Like, if nature provides for us, it is our duty to take care of nature and keep it for posterity. Otherwise, the whole thing will become extinct one day. So you cannot use it up like that. Like, but modern society, secularization believes in this kind of massive consuming everything as if there's nothing to be left.
If I may add
Yes.
to what you have just said about the Anthropocene and the problem that modernity has ushered us to. I was reading a book by Abdul Mateen, and the name of the book is Green Deen. Green Deen, and in that book, Abdul Mateen says that he comes up with a very beautiful sentence. I remember it. The world is a mosque, and we are its Khalifa, I mean the steward. So it is our religious or moral duty to protect the world.
Exactly.
So when we approach a religious injunction, leading to a protection of the world. So a world that has been ravaged by forces of modernity. This is one aspect, religion or faith or religion, and can lead to a positive future. So any other question? It is already.
Yeah, it's already tell me.
Yeah.
I would like to kind of. Mateen, I hope
Yes. No. I actually have a long question, but I will reserve my questions today. Can I say something?
Yeah, please go ahead, madam.
Yes, yes, please.
So thank you so much. Actually, you won't like believe that there's no light in my place. This is Ladakh. I'm totally in like darkness, and it's minus 20 degree right now.
Wow.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much. It was really wonderful. So my battery is about to go.
Okay.
So it was really
Thank you so
awesome.
much,
There
Ranjan.
was,
I really appreciate it.
it's also snowing in the hills,
Wow.
and it's like just minus 20, and it was really nice. I didn't want to like leave the thing also, and I'm so really really thank you so much. It was
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you, Ranjan, for, I mean, like, your words mean a lot. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So with this, we come to the
But Matin did not answer if he was the author of the Green Dean.
No, it's Ibrahim.
no.
He has to add it. Ibrahim Abdul Mateen.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, he's from the USA. Yeah.
I know, just Rafat sir, my
Yes.
it's not basically questions. I was still struggling in my mind about
Yeah.
basically the philosophy, Ambedkarite philosophy, and how to understand the sense of suffering, deprivations, hierarchy, inequality. Because as a student of political sociology, we deal these questions of hierarchy, inequality so much, and how to philosophize. I mean, like the entire debate of social justice. I mean, and how you see and how you place Ambedkarite debates, or rather to say Ambedkar, with the entire context, Indian context of the movement for social justice.
Yeah, I mean, like suffering, I would say, Mateen, is a very deep, I mean, like, and not only in Islam, but if you go to the entire tradition of Western thought, like, I have always been fascinated from the time of Aristotle. Like, we read the Poetics, like, what happens, the catharsis that he talks about, not just pity and fear, but kind of over purging those as bad emotions. You come to the Stoics, this idea of, can you actually understand suffering, or what suffering is something which is actually built into the nature of reality. Because if there is suffering, only then can you realize, if there is death, then there has to be life. That kind of thing. Everything is in a kind of pair. Everything is in pairs. So you will see when you read the Quran, I mean, like, every time the divine is mentioned, it's always in pairs, like Rahman, Rahim. So it's always, there are several, like, and it's just one I can immediately think of. And but then I think what happens is, even this idea of suffering gets, in Western thought, there is a part of it which aestheticizes it, and then there is one part of it which sublimates it. And both, I feel, as Western thought shows, fails to engage with it in the true sense. And suffering becomes something like, as long as you don't face it yourself, but you face it from a distance, and then you can always talk about suffering. And there is always a kind of a sense of heroic, in the face of suffering, you are. But suffering is something which one has to acknowledge as part of reality. And I think I haven't read Ambedkar much on suffering and this kind of deprivation and all. I'm like, maybe with your guidance, I will. But I mean, I think it has a great deal of kind of. I mean, I feel it can engage. It has a great deal of potential to engage with this kind of what goes wrong with the perception of suffering in this whole trajectory of Western thought. It has the potential of engaging with it in an extremely, I mean, very important ways, significant ways. So that's what I feel.
Thank you so much, Professor. With the permission of Chair Borsif Bhai, just I would like to add one sentence here. In generally the way we see Ambedkar in our popular political discourse is just a right-based approach. I think, I mean, like, of course, the huge, enormous amount of literature, philosophical literature, Ambedkar as a political philosopher, and how he is basically philosophizing the entire discourse of rights.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and he is using Buddha's, I mean, if you read, I mean, of course, you have gone to that very famous book, the idea of, Buddha, Buddhist, he was using Buddhist philosophy and principles in describing or philosophizing the Indian politics. I think,
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure we will have a later on. We have a great discussion.
Yes, yes.
Thanks for this perspective, Professor. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. Most welcome.
Yeah, so with this, we come to the end of this session.
Yeah.
It was really fascinating listening to you and talking to you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Rafat Ali.
Thank you.
So
I also, I'm really glad that there were so many questions and so many questions. And I'm really thankful for this participation. Yeah.
hope that we will have you at some other platform and
Future.
listen to you again. Yeah, in future.
Sure.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you all very much, and good night. Good night. Okay.
Good night. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Good night. Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night. Yeah. Hassan. So Hassan.
রেকর্ডিংটা অফ করে দিতে হবে।
Okay. Okay.
ভালো হলো মোর্শেদ ভাই না?
হ্যাঁ, ভালো লাগলো। ভালো
ভেরি